Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So this time it's going to be a battle report between Empire of Sunstyle and Vermin Swarm. This is a rematch of a match that we have played a couple of times now, but with the new update we thought it was worth it to give it a try again. So this is my newly updated list for Empire of Sunstyle with the 18 Knights of the Sun Griffin. If you want some more advice on this and stuff, then just please comment below. This was the list for my opponent, roughly speaking. So yes, well, everything that's here. He thought it would fit all in, but at the end of the battle, it turned out that he actually made a list with 350 points too much, more or less, because he didn't count the assassins in the total points. So if you would recalculate, then probably you're gonna end up with too many points. But such is life. So this is deployment. Me from left to right, I have the Knights of the Sun Griffin with Banner of Discipline, a unit of heavy infantry, a unit of state militia behind them, knightly orders with all the characters, heavy infantry, Knights of the Sun Griffin with flaming standard, the arcane engine, and the Knights of the Sun Griffin with Banner of Discipline. We were playing marching columns, and my opponent was starting the deployment on the top right. I started on the bottom right. My opponent was quite surprised that I put the Knights of the Sun Griffin there in the water as first drop, because that would rule out the right side of the board. But my argument was that he could also still go on the left side of the building, and then I would want these Knights of the Sun Griffin to be there anyway. So basically I deployed my army right across from the building that was in the middle of the field. Could have deployed the state militia first, because they would not be that pivotal in this game anyway. But this is what I did. On my opponent's side, from left to right, he has the 40 legionnaires, the slaves next to the building, 3 units of canister launchers in the back, unit of black fur veterans, 1 unit of Shadowfire stalkers. We did talk about whether he should deploy these or whether he should let them ambush. We were having a bit of a more open game, more open to discussion anyway. I advised him to actually put them down, because otherwise I just advance turn 1 in such an aggressive way that I will try to charge turn 2, so he won't have any chaff. I think in the end it would have been better to have 1 unit ambushing, 1 unit deploy, because then he can basically chaff me 1 turn if I try to go very, very aggressive. Otherwise, after the Shadowfire, he has the Dictator, Marmillos, then the 2 cannons, the Fetish Brutes, the Ignifier squads twice, and the other Shadowfire stalkers. So my first turn, because I dropped for first, I get to go first. My first turn, I figured that on the left side I can use my unit of chickens to still be able to wheel in to his lines, but also to zone out his legionnaires. And for the rest, yeah, I'm just advancing. I'm trying not to give him any meaningful charges. So I have 1 unit of chickens that is going up quite aggressively, because the distance between us is like 14-15 inches, something like that. So I do buff these with magic, just to make sure that my opponent, if he's going to charge in, he's not going to have a good time. And then my opponent's turn 1, I don't have a picture of my opponent's turn 1, I believe. So we'll immediately go to my turn 2. So basically my opponent doesn't really do a lot in his turn 1 other than to shuffle around a little bit. And then in my turn 2 I decide to just go in. Because there's 2 potential scenarios basically. Either I go in and I try to do some damage, and some effects might happen where I go through some of his units, possibly. Or I grind them down below a limit where the rest of the army, so the remaining unit of Knights of the Sun Griffin and the Night Bus, can hopefully deal with the rest. Or I don't manage and I lose some Knights of the Sun Griffin units. The objective we played, by the way, was capture the flag, so that was Basically, if this had been the ETC, I think I would not have engaged these lines. Just go for magic missiles on my magic and not for that many combat buffs to force my opponent to come to me. Um, but I just wanted to try to see what would happen if I would go and commit fully. So I did this. I ended up charging the slaves on the left side because I don't want to charge these black furs with a unit of Knights of the Sun Griffin, um, especially if I have to face them frontally and there's still a unit of Mamillos that can charge me in the flank afterwards. So the heavy infantry, they charged the Shadow First Stalkers of my opponent that had advanced 10 inches forward. They are fearless, so I could charge them in the flank, reform, and then chaff my opponent um, so that he could not charge my Knights of the Sun Griffin in the flank with this big block, and also not with the Momillos. And on the right side, I got a charge in against the Fetish Brute. So the thing about Vermin Swarm is that you can charge in, you can get into combats that are favorable, but then in their turn they're gonna shoot and shoot and shoot, and then you don't have anything left anymore, basically. So after this, what's gonna happen? My Knights of the Sun Griffin on my left are still in combat with the Vermin Slaves. My opponent did get a little bit unlucky with the shooting into that combat. And on the right side, I actually managed to grind out the Fetish Brutes, which we both didn't really expect because well, of the amount of ignifiers there, and also the damage of the Fetish Brutes themselves. We were not expecting that. However, you can see that my electoral cavalry has suffered some losses. This is because my opponent could shoot with 2 canister launcher stands, so that's 2 shots. He got 1 hit, and then they have +1 to hit if you take trial and terror, or +1 to wound if you take trial and terror. So that's 6 hits with AP 10 that wound on a 3+. He did 5 wounds with 1 stand, basically. I don't know if the rework on the canister launchers has been successful. So this basically means that I cannot engage my opponent's lines until I get rid of the canister launchers with my knights. We also played it in the sense that the canister launcher units are still catapults, so they can only score 6 hits on 1 unit of Knights of the Sun Griffin. After the battle, we discovered that that is no longer the case, in the sense that the limit for the unit has been removed. So a unit can still just inflict 18 hits on a unit of Knights of the Sun Griffin, basically just completely annihilating them. Yeah, so I still try to chaff up my opponent's big blocks. I try to go around and engage from other sides. My opponent, meanwhile, he brought up the Vermin Legionnaires to threaten the flank of my Knights of the Sun Griffin. And then a bit later in the game, I turn towards my opponent's Vermin Legionnaires that are close to the building. My Knights of the Sun Griffin make short work of the remaining Vermin slaves. And my Knights of the Sun Griffin on the right side, they mop up 1 unit of ignifiers. And otherwise, my opponent still has his Marmillos, his Legionnaires, all of his shooting, and the Vermin Ruinous Dictator. So I would say that it is still looking quite good for him, to be honest. He also still has the 3 assassins that can pop up somewhere. So my opponent's turn, I don't remember exactly what happened, but I believe he just walks away from the middle with the Marmillos because he doesn't want to end up engaging my cavalry. So he's just gonna go for the Knights of the Sun Griffin that I have over there. He has his Ruinous Dictator who goes into my Knights of the Sun Griffin together with some weapon teams, I believe, because this guy can just grind out a full unit of Knights of the Sun Griffin. And we get an engagement on the left side with the Vermin Legionnaires against another unit of Knights of the Sun Griffin. Here he pops the 3 assassins, and otherwise, well, on my side, basically everything is melting down a little bit. And then later in the game, my Knights of the Sun Griffin don't make it against the assassins of my opponent, so they eventually break and flee. And yeah, the Knights of the Sun Griffin in the middle, they get destroyed by the Dictator, and the shooting from the canisters, that still goes over. The Knights of the Sun Griffin in the far right, they get munched up by the Mamillos. I can't really do anything with my cavalry as long as one unit of canister launchers is still on the board. And that is basically the game. At this moment, we have played 5 turns. It was getting quite late, so we called it. But if it would have been my turn, then I could have rallied, for example, the unit on the left on discipline 8. At this point, I still had each of my Sun Griffin units at half strength, but then I would have had one at full strength and 2 gone. So the point-wise, that would have been kind of similar. I would have just pulled back everything. My opponent would probably not have been able to do that much more. So the outcome would have been quite similar, to be honest. I was afterwards thinking, like, what would happen if you would remove 350 points from my opponent? Like, for example, the assassins, then the matchup on the left side would have been more beneficial to me. If you remove 2 units of canister launchers, this is going to be a win for me. And yeah, there's basically anything in the list. If you remove it, it's going to be quite a downgrade to the enemy army. But canister launchers, oh man, I cannot use my cavalry in this matchup. I just can't. So that is a shame. I thought we were breaking away from very polarized design, but apparently we're not. Yeah, and with that, basically, that is my report of this game. It ended up being a 12-8 for my opponent because I had killed a couple more points than him, but he had the objective. And with that, I will end this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you the next time.